Darius felt the temperature of the room drop 10 degrees the moment he sat down. He was 36 years old, a man who found profound beauty in the crystalline logic of mathematics, and he made a salary of $34,000 a year teaching it at Durham Technical Community College. This fact, more than any other, seemed to define him in the cavernous dining room of the Hope Valley Country Club. The air, thick with the scent of money and roasted duck, felt difficult to breathe. He sat on a $3,000 Chippendale replica chair, his own $120 suit, feeling like a costume rented for the evening. Across the vast expanse of polished mahogany, his wife's family was a glittering constellation of casual wealth. His wife, Simone, looked radiant and perfectly at home. Her dress, a silk sheath the color of champagne, had cost $1,800, a fact she'd mentioned with a casual shrug, as if discussing the weather. It shimmered under the light of a $25,000 crystal chandelier. Her brother Marcus sat opposite Darius, a smug, self-satisfied grin plastered on his face. Marcus was a partner at a boutique tech investment firm. He wore an $8,700 Armani suit and a Patek Philippe watch that was worth more than Darius's 2012 Toyota Camry. They were celebrating Marcus's latest triumph, the acquisition of some small startup for a figure that was tossed around with dizzying nonchalance. An easy 8 figures, Marcus's father, a retired surgeon with a portfolio that could fund a small nation, boomed with pride. Darius tried to be invisible. He focused on his water glass, tracing the condensation with his finger. He knew this ritual. He was the family's pet project, the odd, quiet man their beautiful Simone had inexplicably chosen. He was a symbol of her brief, rebellious phase, a phase they all seemed to be patiently waiting for her to outgrow. The conversation turned, as it always did, to money. Not in the anxious way Darius and his colleagues discussed it, but as a sport. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes glinting with a familiar, predatory light. He was telling a story about a recent trip to Monaco, about chartering a $150,000 per week yacht. Simone, sensing Darius's discomfort, placed a hand on his arm. It was a gesture that was supposed to look like affection, but he knew it was a warning. Play along, don't be difficult. Then, Marcus turned his attention directly to Darius. So, Darius, he began, his voice dripping with condescension, still shaping young minds for what, 30, 35K a year? It's noble work, really. Someone has to do it. The table fell quiet. It was the silence of a staged execution. Darius felt every eye on him. He could hear the faint clink of ice in a distant glass. He simply nodded, his throat too tight to form words. 34, he managed to say, his voice barely a whisper. Marcus chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. He took a sip of his $400 a bottle Bordeaux, then looked at his father, a conspiratorial gleam in his eye. He gestured with his chin toward a portfolio binder sitting on a nearby credenza, a document detailing some new, aggressive investment strategy. "Don't worry, Dad," Marcus said, his voice loud enough for the entire table to hear. He didn't even look at Darius, just spoke about him, as if he were a piece of furniture. "I moved it. A $30,000 man shouldn't sit this close to real money. It's bad for the feng shui." The laughter was immediate and sharp. His father-in-law barked a laugh. His mother-in-law tittered behind a perfectly manicured hand, and even Simone, his wife of 4 years, offered a tight, pained smile that did nothing to defend him. She squeezed his arm again, this time a plea for him to endure the humiliation quietly. He looked at her, at the woman who had once claimed to love his mind, his quiet passion, his integrity. He saw a stranger, her eyes reflecting the cold, hard glitter of the chandelier above. In that moment, Darius felt a profound and chilling loneliness. He was not part of this family. He was the court jester, and the price of admission was his dignity. He had no idea, sitting there in his cheap suit, that the numbers he worked on in his cramped home office, the elegant, complex algorithms that brought him so much joy, were about to become the very definition of real money. And they had no idea what was coming. Have you ever been in a room where you felt completely invisible, where your worth was measured by a number that had nothing to do with who you are? Let us know your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of justice and empowerment. The facade of their life together was built on a foundation of such contradictions. Their two-bedroom rental in Durham's historic Haiti neighborhood was a world away from the sprawling estates of Hope Valley. It was a modest apartment costing them $1,450 a month, filled with mismatched furniture they'd collected over the years. On the walls, instead of expensive art, were framed prints from the Haiti Heritage Center and photos of Darius's students at the annual math fair. To an outsider, it looked like a warm, loving home. Their mornings were a study in contrasts. At 6 a.m., Darius would be at their small kitchen table, the surface worn from years of use. He'd be meticulously packing his lunch, a turkey sandwich on whole wheat, an apple, and a small bag of carrots. The total cost of his meal was perhaps $3.50. He'd sip his coffee, made in a simple $40 Mr. Coffee machine, while reviewing his notes for his morning Calculus 1 class. His work clothes were simple, comfortable slacks from Kohl's, maybe $45, and a button-down shirt that he ironed himself. His watch was an $89 Timex, a gift from his mother, its leather band worn soft with time. Simone would emerge an hour later, a whirlwind of expensive scents and fabrics. Her coffee came from a $700 Nespresso machine, using pods that cost over $1 each. She'd lament that they were running low on the arpeggio flavor. While Darius's breakfast was a piece of toast, hers was often a $12 smoothie she'd picked up from a trendy juice bar after her $150 a month gym session. "It's an investment in my health, honey," she'd say, not noticing the irony as Darius carefully measured out his generic brand oatmeal. Her job as a marketing consultant for a high-end real estate firm afforded her these luxuries, but her income, around $90,000 a year, was constantly strained by her tastes. Her closet was a shrine to aspirational living. A $2,400 Burberry trench coat hung next to a row of shoes, each pair costing more than Darius's monthly car payment. Her favorite handbag, a Celine that she'd saved for months to buy, was worth $3,500. It sat on their second-hand IKEA dining chair like a queen on a makeshift throne. Darius never judged her for it. He believed in living simply. His passions weren't material. They lived in the quiet hours after dinner, when Simone was watching a reality show on their modest $500 television. He would retreat to their small second bedroom, which served as his office. The room was cramped, dominated by a large whiteboard covered in complex equations. His desk was a simple wooden table he'd bought for $75 at a thrift store. On it sat his university-issued laptop, a Dell Latitude worth about $900, and stacks of notebooks filled with his meticulous handwriting. For the past 3 years, he had been working on a private project, a passion that consumed him. It was a novel algorithm for optimizing data compression, a complex piece of mathematical architecture that was both elegant and, he believed, revolutionary. It had applications in everything from streaming media to financial modeling. He wasn't thinking about money when he worked on it. He was thinking about the beauty of the problem, the sheer joy of creating a solution that was perfectly efficient. The work was his sanctuary, a place where his $34,000 salary was irrelevant. The only thing that mattered was the truth of the numbers. Simone was vaguely aware of his hobby. She'd occasionally poke her head into the office. "Still playing with your numbers, babe?" she'd ask, her tone a mixture of affection and pity. She couldn't comprehend why a man would spend hundreds of unpaid hours on something that didn't immediately translate to a paycheck. "You're so smart, Darius. You could be making real money if you applied yourself to something practical." He'd try to explain it to her, his face lit with passion. He'd point to the whiteboard, to the flowing lines of code and symbols. "It's not just numbers, Simone. It's a language. This could change how we handle massive data sets. It's faster, more efficient than anything that currently exists." She would smile, a patient, placid smile, and pat his shoulder. "That's nice, honey. Just don't forget to take out the trash." The conversation would be over. She'd retreat to the living room, to the world of designer clothes and luxury vacations she saw on TV, leaving him alone in the glow of his monitor. He thought her disinterest was benign. He thought it was just a fundamental difference in their personalities. He had no idea that she was listening, filing away key phrases and concepts, not out of love or support, but with a cold, calculating purpose he could not yet imagine. The domestic normalcy of their lives, the quiet routine of his $3.50 lunch and her $12 smoothie, was a carefully constructed lie, and the truth was about to detonate it all. The outrage accumulated in layers, each one thicker and more suffocating than the last. The first layer was applied at Thanksgiving dinner, held, as always, at the Hope Valley estate. The air was thick with the scent of turkey and condescension. Darius had tried to engage his father-in-law in a conversation about a recent article in Scientific American on quantum computing. "That's fascinating, Darius," his father-in-law had said, his eyes glazing over. "But a bit above my pay grade. Tell me, Marcus." He pivoted, his voice suddenly booming with interest. "What's the latest on that biotech venture? Are we looking at a 10 times return?" The conversation immediately shifted back to its comfortable territory: capital, returns, and acquisitions. Darius was once again relegated to the sidelines, a silent observer. Later, as he helped clear the table, a task none of the other men ever seemed to perform, he overheard Simone talking to her mother in the kitchen. "I just wish he had more ambition," Simone said, her voice a low, frustrated murmur. "He's brilliant, Mama. You know he is. But he's content in that little classroom, with his little salary. It's embarrassing sometimes." "Patience, darling," her mother replied, her voice smooth as silk. "Men like that are a project. You just have to guide them toward their potential, or find a way to monetize it yourself." Darius froze, a stack of fine china plates, each worth more than his weekly grocery budget, growing heavy in his hands. He backed away silently, the words echoing in his mind. "Monetize it yourself." He told himself he was misinterpreting, that it was just the casual cynicism of the wealthy. He wanted to believe that. The second layer was applied a few weeks later. Simone came into his office one evening, a rare occurrence. She wasn't wearing her usual lounge clothes, but a $600 silk robe he'd only seen once or twice. She sat on the edge of his desk, running a finger over the spine of one of his notebooks. "Tell me about your project again," she said, her voice unusually soft and inquisitive. "The data thingy. Marcus was saying his firm is always looking for the next big thing in data management. He said it's a billion-dollar industry." Darius, starved for her interest, felt a surge of hope. He turned from his screen, his fatigue momentarily forgotten. He launched into an explanation, simplifying the complex mathematics into concepts she could grasp. He talked about the core innovation, a predictive modeling component that allowed the algorithm to anticipate data structures before they were fully received, drastically reducing processing time. "So it's like it knows what you're going to send before you send it?" she asked, her eyes sharp and focused. "In a manner of speaking, yes, that's the key. It's a paradigm shift from reactive to predictive compression, he explained, thrilled by her engagement. And this is all yours? You came up with all of it? She pressed. Every line, he said with a quiet pride. She smiled, a slow, thoughtful expression on her face. That's amazing, Darius, truly. You should be so proud. She kissed him on the forehead, a gesture that felt less like affection and more like a seal of approval on a business transaction. I'm just trying to be a supportive wife, she added as she left the room. He watched her go, a cold knot of unease tightening in his stomach. He had made a critical mistake. The third layer was a brutal argument about finances in mid-January. Their credit card statement had arrived. Simone had spent nearly $4,000 the previous month, including a $1,200 weekend spa trip with her friends. Darius, who tracked their budget on a meticulous spreadsheet, pointed it out gently. Simone, we can't sustain this, he said, holding the paper. This is more than my take-home pay for the month. Her face hardened. The soft, inquisitive wife was gone, replaced by the woman from the country club. Sustain this, Darius? This isn't even a life. My friends are planning trips to Paris. They're buying second homes. And I'm getting a lecture over a spa weekend? Marcus just put a down payment on a $2.5 million house in Chapel Hill. We can't even afford a new sofa for our rented apartment. That's not fair, Simone. My work is important to me. Important? She scoffed, her voice rising. What's important is our future. What's important is not having to live paycheck to paycheck on a teacher's salary. My God, Darius, don't you ever want more? Or are you just happy in your little world of chalk dust and pocket protectors? The cruelty of it stole his breath. He looked at her, at the beautiful woman he loved, and saw the deep, unbridgeable chasm between their worlds. It wasn't just about money. It was about respect. And in her eyes he had none. The final, suffocating layer was applied a month before the end. He had made a significant breakthrough, a final piece of the puzzle that made his algorithm 10 times more efficient. He was practically vibrating with excitement. He found Simone in the living room, scrolling through her phone, looking at pictures of a $90,000 Mercedes-Benz GLC. I did it, he said, his voice filled with a joy he couldn't contain. Simone, I finished it. The final proof. It works. It actually works. She looked up from her phone, her expression bored. Oh, that's great, honey, she said, her thumb continuing to flick across the screen. Did you remember to pick up my dry cleaning? They have my blue dress, the Armani one. He stood there, deflated. The greatest professional achievement of his life, and she was asking about her $2,800 dress. Did you hear me? He asked, his voice quiet. Yes, Darius, I heard you. You finished your little math problem. Congratulations, she said, not looking at him. Now can you please figure out how we're going to afford a real vacation this year? Because looking at pictures of Bali isn't cutting it. He walked back to his office and closed the door. The whiteboard, once a source of infinite joy, now seemed to mock him. Her words, your little math problem, hung in the air, heavier than any equation. The outrage was no longer a suspicion or an unease. It was a certainty, a cold, hard stone in the pit of his stomach. He was a resource to be managed, an asset to be monetized. He was not a husband. He was not a partner. He was a problem to be solved. And he was beginning to understand that his wife and her family had already devised their own brutal, elegant solution. The discovery came not with a bang, but with the quiet chime of an incoming email. It was Tuesday, March 14th, at exactly 6:52 a.m. Darius was already awake, sitting in his small office with a cup of black coffee. The pre-dawn sky over Durham was a soft, bruised purple. Rain was beginning to streak down the window pane, each drop a tiny, distorted lens reflecting the dim light of his desk lamp. He was doing what he always did in the quiet of the morning, refining a small section of his code, polishing the elegant architecture of his algorithm. An email notification popped up on his screen. The sender was an address he didn't recognize: examiner.p.chen@uspto.gov. The subject line was stark and bureaucratic. Patent application number 894512B. Notice of potentially overlapping. Subject matter with application number 894509A. His brow furrowed. He hadn't filed a patent yet. He was still in the process of preparing his disclosure documents for the university's technology transfer office. He had a meeting scheduled for the following week. He assumed it was spam or some kind of phishing attempt. But curiosity, the same instinct that drove his research, made him click. The email was dense with legal and technical jargon. He scanned through it, his eyes catching on key phrases. Significant conceptual overlap. Identical predictive modeling frameworks. Uncommon degree of similarity in the foundational logic. His heart began to beat a little faster. He scrolled down, looking for the name of the other applicant, the holder of application number 894509A. He expected to see the name of a research institution or a large tech corporation that had stumbled upon a similar idea. And then he saw it. Applicant of record, Marcus Thorne, on behalf of Thorne Capital Ventures, LLC. The name seemed to vibrate on the screen. Marcus, his brother-in-law, Thorne Capital Ventures, Marcus's firm. The room went silent. The sound of the rain outside faded away. The warmth from his coffee mug seeped into his hands, but he couldn't feel it. He read the name again and again. It was like looking at a word in a foreign language that he suddenly, horrifyingly, understood. He clicked on the attachment, a redacted comparison document prepared by the examiner, Mr. Chen. It showed side-by-side excerpts from the two applications. On one side, the dry corporate language of a legal filing. On the other, sections of Marcus's technical description. Darius felt the air leave his lungs. It wasn't just similar, it was his work. The phrasing was different, scrubbed clean by a lawyer. But the core ideas, the unique architecture, the very soul of his creation, were there in black and white. He saw his predictive modeling component described, his paradigm shift from reactive to predictive compression. He even saw a specific, unique variable name he had used, a private joke, a nod to a long-dead mathematician, staring back at him from Marcus's application. A wave of nausea washed over him. He gripped the edge of his $75 thrift store desk, his knuckles turning white. The pieces clicked into place with the sickening, final thud of a vault door slamming shut. Simone's questions. Tell me about your project again. Marcus was saying his firm is always looking for the next big thing. Her mother's voice in the kitchen. Find a way to monetize it yourself. Marcus's smug confidence, the condescending jokes, the entire charade. It wasn't just about belittling him. It was a cover. While they were mocking his little math problem, they were actively stealing it. He thought of Simone, sleeping peacefully in their bed, in the room next door. The woman he had shared his life with for 4 years. The woman he had trusted with his deepest passion. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over him. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a conspiracy. A calculated, deliberate act of theft orchestrated by his wife and her brother. He looked at the timestamp on the email, 6:52 a.m. The sun was still not up. The world was still dark, but for Darius, everything was suddenly, brutally illuminated. The rain against the glass sounded like weeping. He didn't feel anger, not yet. He felt a profound, hollow emptiness. He felt the cold, hard precision of a mathematical proof clicking into place. His love, his marriage, his trust. It had all been a variable in their equation of greed, and he had been solved. He closed the laptop. The room was plunged back into near darkness, but Darius could see everything perfectly. He knew exactly what he had to do. The first rule of strategy is to never reveal your position until you are ready to strike. At 7:30 a.m., Darius walked into the kitchen, his face a mask of placid normalcy. The nauseating shock had receded, replaced by a glacial calm. He was no longer a husband. He was a scientist observing a hostile organism. Simone was at the counter, scrolling through her phone while the $700 Nespresso machine hissed and sputtered. She was looking at real estate listings in Hope Valley, the same exclusive neighborhood where her parents lived. Houses with price tags that started at $1.5 million. "Morning, honey," she said, not looking up. "Morning," he replied, his voice even. He opened the refrigerator and took out the carton of eggs. He moved with deliberate, unhurried motions. "Anything interesting?" he asked, gesturing to her phone. "Oh, just dreaming," she said with a light, airy laugh. "This one has a pool and a tennis court. Can you imagine?" She finally looked at him, her eyes bright and animated. There was a new energy about her, a confident hum he hadn't seen before. He now knew it was the energy of a secret soon to be revealed, a jackpot about to be hit. "Sounds nice," he said, cracking 2 eggs into a bowl. He whisked them slowly. "How's Marcus doing? I feel like we haven't heard from him since the holidays." It was a lie. They had seen him just 2 weeks ago. He was testing her. Her eyes flickered for a fraction of a second, a micro-expression of panic that he would have missed yesterday. Today, it was as loud as a gunshot. "Oh, you know Marcus," she said, recovering quickly. "Busy, busy, busy. He's working on some huge deal. Very hush-hush. You know how he is." Lie number 1, documented. "A tech deal?" Darius asked, pouring the eggs into a hot pan. He kept his back to her, watching her reflection in the dark glass of the microwave. "I think so. Something to do with data. It's all way over my head," she said, waving a dismissive hand. She took a sip of her coffee. Lie number 2. It was so easy for her. He ate his eggs in silence, the familiar taste of his simple breakfast now tasting like ash. He feigned ignorance, nodding along as she chattered about her day, about a meeting with a client, about a new pair of $800 Jimmy Choo shoes she was coveting. Every word was a performance, and he was the unwilling audience. He felt a strange, chilling detachment, as if he were watching a movie of his own life. After she left for work, a cloud of her $250 Chanel perfume lingering in the air, Darius began his work. He did not call Marcus. He did not confront Simone. He moved with cold, documented precision. His first call was not to a lawyer, but to Dr. Anya Sharma, the head of the technology transfer office at the college. He kept his voice calm and professional, framing his inquiry as a procedural question. "Dr. Sharma, Darius Cole here. I have a quick question about IP disclosure. If I have digital manuscripts of my research, what's the best way to establish a verifiable timeline of creation?" "The file's metadata is a good start, Darius," she explained. "Every digital file has a creation and modification date stamped into it. Our university servers also create backups with immutable timestamps. Send me what you have. I'll have our IT department verify the provenance." He spent the next 2 hours compiling his evidence. He went through years of files on his laptop and on the university's cloud drive. He found the very first document titled compression_theory_V 0.1.docx, created on April 12th, 3 years prior. He found every subsequent version, every notebook scan, every email he'd ever sent to himself with an updated draft. He created a folder, named it Provenance, and uploaded it to the secure server Dr. Sharma had indicated. Each file was a digital breadcrumb, a time-stamped piece of his intellectual soul. The weight of the evidence felt solid, real. It was math. It was logic. It was undeniable. That evening was the hardest. Simone came home flushed with excitement. "You are not going to believe the day I had," she said, dropping her $3,500 Celine bag on the floor. "I have a surprise for you." She poured 2 glasses of wine, handing one to him. "Marcus closed his deal," she announced, her voice trembling with excitement. "The data thing. It's huge, Darius. Life-changing huge. And he wants to cut us in. A gift for my support." He stared at her, the wine glass cold in his hand. For her support. The audacity was breathtaking. "How much?" he asked, his voice a dead, flat calm. "A check for $50,000, she whispered, her eyes wide. "He's bringing it over tomorrow. It's a down payment on a new life, honey. No more this tiny apartment. No more worrying about your salary. We're finally going to be free." He looked at her, at the triumphant, greedy light in her eyes. She thought this was the happy ending. She thought he would be grateful for the scraps from the table of the man who had stolen his life's work. He saw the future she had planned for them, paid for with his own genius, and he felt nothing but ice in his veins. "That's incredible, Simone," he said, forcing the words out. He raised his glass. "To our new life." She beamed, clinking her glass against his. The sound was hollow, empty. He drank the wine, a cheap $12 bottle he had bought, and it tasted like poison. He was playing dumb, but he wasn't a victim anymore. He was a strategist, and he knew with the certainty of a mathematical axiom that the life she was celebrating was about to be erased. The next morning, Darius took a personal day. He told Simone he was feeling unwell, a lie that came easily now. As soon as she left, he drove his 2012 Toyota Camry not to a doctor's office, but to downtown Durham, to a gleaming glass tower that scraped the sky. The building was a monument to the kind of wealth his wife's family worshipped. He felt out of place in his $45 Kohl's slacks as he walked across the marble lobby, his worn dress shoes squeaking softly on the polished floor. He took the elevator to the 34th floor, to the offices of Albright and Finch, a law firm specializing in intellectual property litigation. The university's tech transfer office had given him the name. "Eleanor Albright," Dr. Sharma had said. "She's a shark, but she's our shark. She doesn't lose." The receptionist led him to a corner office with a panoramic view of the city. The glass walls made Darius feel exposed, a stark contrast to the cramped, familiar comfort of his office. Eleanor Albright stood to greet him. She was a tall, impeccably dressed black woman in her late 50s, her graying hair styled in elegant twists. She wore an $8,700 Armani suit that radiated power and competence. She didn't smile, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice a low, commanding alto. "Please, sit. My time is billed at $1,200 per hour. Let's not waste it." Darius sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than his monthly rent. He felt a tremor in his hands and clasped them together in his lap. He laid out the story, not with emotion, but with the cold, documented precision he had been rehearsing. He spoke about his research, the years of work, the breakthrough. He detailed the suspicious questions from his wife, the conversation he overheard, the condescending remarks from his brother-in-law. Finally, he placed his laptop on her vast, empty desk and opened the email from the patent examiner. He opened the folder named Provenance. Ms. Albright listened without interruption, her gaze fixed on him. She read the email from the USPTO, her expression unreadable. Then, She spent 20 minutes silently clicking through the files in his evidence folder, her eyes scanning the timestamps, the code, the mathematical proofs. The only sound in the room was the quiet click of her mouse and the distant hum of the city below. When she was done, she leaned back in her chair. She looked at Darius, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something other than professional detachment in her eyes. It was a cold, righteous anger. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "they are not just thieves, they are fools." She explained the legal position in simple, devastating terms. Your brother-in-law, Marcus Thorne, has committed fraud. Not just against you, but against the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Your evidence is pristine. The digital timestamps from the university servers are legally irrefutable. They establish prior art. His patent application is dead on arrival. She paused, letting the words sink in. Furthermore, your employment contract with the college includes a standard intellectual property clause. It stipulates that any invention created using university resources, which includes your laptop and your time, even at home, is the property of the institution, with you as the primary inventor and beneficiary. This is not just your fight, Mr. Cole. This is the university's fight, and they have very deep pockets. Darius felt a weight lift from his shoulders, replaced by a surge of strength. He wasn't alone in this. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we find out what they were planning to do with your work," Ms. Albright said. She picked up her phone and dialed. "Get me everything you can on Thorne Capital Ventures and their recent activities. I want to know about any pending acquisitions or licensing deals related to data compression technology. Spare no expense." The information came back within the hour. A major Silicon Valley tech firm, a giant in the industry, had made an offer to acquire the patent for Marcus's invention. The offer was for $10 million. The deal was set to close in 2 weeks. Darius stared out the window at the city below. $10 million. The number was abstract, unreal. It was the real money Marcus had joked about. And they were going to steal it from him, then offer him $50,000 in hush money, a pittance, to keep the golden goose quiet. "They made a critical mistake," Ms. Albright said, her voice cutting through his thoughts. "They underestimated you. They saw a community college teacher with a small salary and assumed you were simple. They never imagined you'd have the foresight to document your work or the courage to fight back." She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "Here is what we are going to do. We will not file a lawsuit. A public fight is messy and long. We will request a private mediation. We will invite your wife, your brother-in-law, and their counsel. We will present our evidence in a quiet room, and we will dismantle their entire world in one afternoon. The $10 million offer will not be rescinded. It will be redirected to its rightful owner, you. You will get your work back, Mr. Cole, and you will get paid for it." Darius looked at the formidable woman before him, at the glass tower around them, at the city stretching out to the horizon. He was just a math teacher from Haiti, but he had the truth on his side, and the truth, he was beginning to realize, was the most powerful variable of all. The strike was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in a neutral conference room at a mediation center in downtown Raleigh. The room was designed to be soothing, with beige walls, abstract art, and a long, polished oak table that felt as big as a battleship. The air conditioning hummed softly. The entire setup, from the complimentary bottles of Fiji water to the soundproof walls, cost $800 an hour, a fee Ms. Albright had insisted be paid by the opposing party. Darius arrived with Ms. Albright at precisely 2 p.m. He wore the same $120 suit he'd worn to the country club, but today it felt different. It no longer felt like a costume. It felt like armor. He carried a simple leather briefcase containing nothing but a copy of his teaching schedule for the next semester. He was calm. The turbulent emotions of the past weeks had settled into a hard, clear focus. They sat on one side of the table. Ms. Albright arranged a single, slim file folder in front of her. At 2:05 p.m., they arrived. Marcus strode in first, radiating an aura of arrogant impatience. He was flanked by a lawyer who looked exactly like him, just 20 years older and grayer. A man in a $10,000 suit with the weary eyes of someone who charged by the minute. Simone trailed behind them, a ghost in a beige dress that probably cost $1,000. She looked pale and nervous. She wouldn't meet Darius's eyes. She sat as far away from him as the table would allow, her hands clenched in her lap. Their lawyer, a Mr. Sterling, began with a booming, dismissive tone. "Let's make this quick," he said, addressing Ms. Albright as if Darius wasn't there. "My client, Mr. Thorne, has generously offered a settlement of $75,000 to put this frivolous and frankly insulting claim to rest. It's a nuisance fee, nothing more. There is no basis for this shakedown." Marcus smirked, leaning back in his chair. He looked at Darius for the first time, a look of pure contempt. "Take the money, Darius," he said. "It's more than you'll make in 2 years. Go buy yourself a new car." Darius said nothing. He simply looked at his brother-in-law, his expression unreadable. Ms. Albright let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. Then she leaned forward, her voice soft, but carrying the weight of iron. "Mr. Sterling, we are not here to discuss a nuisance fee. We are here to discuss felony wire fraud, conspiracy, and the fraudulent filing of a United States patent." Sterling's smile faltered. Marcus sat up a little straighter. "My client, Mr. Darius Cole," Ms. Albright continued, "is the sole and undisputed inventor of the predictive compression algorithm that is the subject of U.S. Patent Application number 894509A, filed by your client. We have receipts." She opened her folder. She didn't raise her voice. She spoke with the cold, documented precision of a surgeon. "Exhibit A," she said, sliding a document across the table. "A certified log from the servers at Durham Technical Community College. It shows the creation of a file named compression_theory_v0.1.docx by Darius Cole on April 12th, 3 years ago. The log is immutable and time-stamped." She slid another paper across. "Exhibit B, a complete history of 147 revisions, all logged, all time-stamped, documenting every stage of the algorithm's development." Another paper. "Exhibit C, an email from Mr. Cole to a colleague at Duke University dated 18 months ago discussing the core principles of the predictive modeling framework. A colleague who is prepared to testify under oath." Sterling's face had lost its color. Marcus was staring at the documents as if they were venomous snakes. Simone had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. "And finally," Ms. Albright said, her voice dropping even lower, "Exhibit D." She slid the email from the patent examiner across the table. A notice from the USPTO itself, citing an uncommon degree of similarity between Mr. Thorne's application and Mr. Cole's work, which the university had confidentially pre-filed for review. The examiner notes, and I quote, "identical foundational logic and unique variable nomenclature." She paused, letting the weight of the evidence crush them. "The variable in question," she added, looking directly at Marcus, "was Hilbert_prime, an obscure reference. I wonder how you came up with that, Mr. Thorne." Marcus's face went white. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "The penalties for patent fraud include fines up to $500,000 and imprisonment for up to 10 years, Ms. Albright stated calmly. And that's before we get to the civil liability. Your firm, Mr. Sterling, could be implicated for failing to perform due diligence. Sterling looked at his client with fury. Simone began to cry, silent tears tracking down her perfectly powdered cheeks. Now, Miss Albright said, shifting gears, let's talk about the $10 million acquisition offer from Omnidata Solutions, which is contingent on this fraudulent patent. The room fell into a deathly silence. Marcus looked as if he'd been punched. Simone let out a small, strangled gasp. How? Sterling stammered. How did you? I am very good at my job, Ms. Albright said flatly. That offer is for my client's work. Therefore, that offer belongs to my client. Here is what is going to happen. Your client will immediately file to withdraw his patent application, citing erroneous data. You will sign a full confession and a non-disclosure agreement, so this never becomes public. In return, we will not press criminal charges. The university will then file the patent under Mr. Cole's name, and we will proceed with the acquisition from Omnidata. The full $10 million will be transferred to an account controlled by my client and the university, to be dispersed according to their IP agreement. She leaned back. This is not a negotiation. These are our terms. You have 5 minutes to accept, or I will make a phone call to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Darius looked across the table at his wife. Her face was a mask of utter devastation. All the arrogance, the entitlement, the casual cruelty had been stripped away. All that was left was a terrified, hollowed-out woman who had gambled everything on the belief that he was weak, and she had lost. He thought of Marcus's words at the country club. He leaned forward slightly and spoke for the first time, his voice quiet and clear, cutting through the silence. It seems, Darius said, looking directly at Marcus, that a $30,000 man can, in fact, sit very close to real money. He can own it. The collapse was total. Marcus slumped in his chair, a broken man. Sterling, after a frantic, whispered conversation, nodded his grim acceptance. Simone just sat there, weeping, her world shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Darius felt no triumph, no joy. He just felt the quiet, clean satisfaction of a perfectly balanced equation. Justice had been served. The consequences cascaded with brutal, mathematical certainty. Each downfall was a direct and measurable result of their own choices. There was no poetry to it, just the cold, hard accounting of their actions. First there was Marcus. The day after the mediation, as per the agreement, his lawyer filed the paperwork to withdraw a U.S. patent application number 894509A. The official reason cited was discovery of fundamental errors in submitted research. But the truth, as it always does in small, insular industries, began to seep out. The whispers started in the exclusive circles of tech finance in Research Triangle Park. A deal gone bad. A fraud allegation. A quiet, high-stakes mediation. Within a month, the board of Thorn Capital Ventures demanded his resignation. To avoid a public scandal and potential lawsuits from their own investors, they forced him out, purchasing his shares for a fraction of their value under a punitive clause in his partnership agreement. He lost his position, his reputation, and an estimated $4.2 million in vested equity. The $2.5 million house in Chapel Hill he was about to close on fell through, and he forfeited his $100,000 deposit. He was professionally ruined. No reputable firm would touch him. The man who lived and breathed real money was suddenly toxic. Then there was Simone. The divorce papers were filed by Ms. Albright's office a week after the mediation. The proceedings were swift and clinical. Because the intellectual property was created by Darius before the marriage and stolen through fraudulent means, the $10 million acquisition payout was designated as his separate, non-marital property. Simone was entitled to nothing. Their shared assets were minimal. The furniture in their $1,450 a month rental apartment and about $4,000 in a joint savings account. Darius let her have it all. He didn't want any of it. He just wanted to be free. Her frantic, spiraling collapse was documented in a series of voicemails he never answered. The first voicemail, left the night of the mediation, was pure rage. "Darius, how could you? You humiliated me. You destroyed my brother. After everything my family has done for you, you are a vindictive, pathetic little man. You'll regret this." The second, 2 days later, was laced with manipulative justification. "Okay, look, I know you're hurt. I made a mistake. I was just trying to help us. I wanted us to have a better life. Can't you see that? Marcus was going to give us $50,000. I did it for you, for us." The third, a week later, after the divorce papers arrived, was steeped in horror and disbelief. "A lawyer? You sent a lawyer? Darius, please. Don't do this. We can talk about this. This is our marriage. You can't just throw it away. I love you." The "I love you" sounded hollow, a desperate last-ditch play. The fourth was pleading. She was crying now. "Please, Darius, pick up the phone. I'll have to move back in with my parents. Do you know what that will be like? They're so disappointed. My life is over. Don't I deserve something? For the years I gave you?" The fifth and final voicemail came a month later. Her voice was flat, defeated. "I'm at my parents' house, in my old childhood bedroom. It has floral wallpaper. I saw in the alumni newsletter that you donated money for a new computer lab at the college. I guess you got your real money after all. I hope you're happy." He deleted the messages. Each one was a data point confirming the correctness of his actions. Simone, stripped of her independent life and her husband's stolen potential, was forced to return to the gilded cage of the Hope Valley Country Club estate. She was no longer the radiant daughter who had married down. She was the failed project, the embarrassing story whispered over cocktails by the pool. Her punishment was to live, day in and day out, with the consequences of her own greed, under the disappointed eyes of the very people whose approval she had valued over her own husband's soul. Finally, there was the family. The Thorns did not face legal charges, but their consequence was social. In a world built on reputation and trust, the stain of fraud is indelible. The story, despite the NDA, was too juicy to stay contained. It became a cautionary tale told at the 19th hole of the golf course. Their name, once a symbol of sharp, aggressive success, was now tinged with the odor of deceit. Their social standing, the currency they valued above all else, was irrevocably devalued. They had worshipped at the altar of money, and in the end, it was the only thing they had left, a cold comfort in their magnificent, silent house. Darius, meanwhile, was free. The consequences were not his to bear. They were simply the logical, unavoidable answer to an equation they had written themselves. 6 months later, the world was washed in the warm, golden light of a North Carolina autumn. The glass towers of downtown were a distant memory, a skyline he rarely saw anymore. Darius's life had not changed in the ways Simone or her family would have understood. He hadn't bought a mansion in Hope Valley or a flashy European sports car. He still drove his 2012 Toyota Camry, which now had over 190,000 miles on it. He still lived in the Haiti neighborhood, though he'd moved into a slightly larger, sunnier, 2-bedroom apartment that he'd bought for a modest $220,000 in cash. He was still teaching at Durham Technical Community College. His salary was still $34,000 a year. On Tuesday and Thursday mornings, he still stood in front of a whiteboard, this one clean and new, in a classroom filled with eager, anxious faces, and he taught Calculus 1. The beauty of the subject, Its perfect, unyielding logic was still his greatest joy. The $10 million acquisition, which after the university's 30% share in taxes had left him with just over $5.1 million, had not changed the core of who he was. It had simply given him freedom. The freedom to live his life on his own terms, unburdened by the need to prove his worth to anyone. His new apartment was filled with things that mattered. The walls were covered not with expensive art, but with beautiful, intricate quilts handmade by his mother, their vibrant colors telling stories of their family. His office was larger now, the window looking out onto a small community garden, where his neighbors grew tomatoes and collard greens. His old $75 desk sat in the center of the room, a humble throne for his work. One Saturday afternoon, he drove to the small, tidy duplex his mother, Mama Rose, had rented for the past 20 years. It was the house he'd grown up in. He found her on the porch, her deep brown skin luminous in the afternoon light, her hands busy tending to her potted geraniums. He sat with her for a while, just talking. He told her about his students, about a particularly bright young woman who was the first in her family to go to college. He didn't talk about the money. He never did. After a while, he handed her a simple white envelope. "What's this, baby?" she asked, wiping the soil from her hands onto her apron. "Just something I wanted you to have," he said. She opened it. Inside was not a check, but a deed. A deed to a charming 3-bedroom brick house on a quiet, tree-lined street a few miles away. It had a large garden in the back, perfect for her flowers and vegetables. He had paid $350,000 for it in cash the week before. She stared at the paper, her eyes slowly filling with tears. She looked from the deed to her son, her expression a mixture of shock and overwhelming love. "Darius," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "How?" "You worked your whole life for us, Mama," he said softly, his own eyes beginning to well up. "It's time you had a place that was all yours. No more rent, no more landlords." She pulled him into a fierce hug, her body trembling. "My boy," she sobbed into his shoulder. "My good, good boy." Later that day, back in his quiet apartment, he found a piece of paper that had been slipped under his door. It was a drawing from one of his students, the bright young woman he'd told his mother about. It was a thank you note. On it, she had drawn a picture of him, a smiling stick figure with neat, short locks, standing in front of a whiteboard covered in numbers. It was a drawing of a black man, her teacher, rendered with the simple, powerful honesty of a grateful heart. Underneath, she had written, "Mr. Cole, thank you for showing me that numbers can be beautiful." He unfolded the drawing and placed it on his desk, next to his laptop. He looked from the childlike drawing to the complex equations on his screen. True wealth is not measured in dollars or stock portfolios. It is not found in the cold reflection of a glass tower or the envious glances of strangers at a country club. Real wealth is quiet. It is the peace of a secure home for your mother. It is the respect you earn through your own integrity. It is the freedom to pursue your passion, not for what it can buy you, but for the beauty it reveals to you. Some people spend their whole lives chasing a number, believing it will make them happy, only to discover they have nothing at all. Others find their fortune in the simple, elegant truth of their work, and in the love they give freely. They are the truly rich. That is the only equation that ever really matters. What does true wealth mean to you? Share your thoughts in the comments. And thank you for being a part of the Love Beyond Pride community, where we celebrate the triumph of character over circumstance.